Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the Sharks' annual Rookie Faceoff tournament, which is, of course, very exciting to see for a couple of reasons. The first, of course, it's always nice to see how the Sharks' younger players will actually perform, where exactly they fall on the Sharks' hierarchy, the Sharks' depth chart, but also it is the sort of demarcation of the end of the off-season here as we transition into the NHL preseason and eventually the NHL regular season as a whole. It's been many months since we've actually seen any sort of competitive game involving the San Jose Sharks organization, so even this face-off tournament that isn't exactly going to be the highest level is still very nice to see. And this game one was against the Los Angeles Kings rookies. The Sharks ended up being victorious in this one 4-3 in a shootout. Obviously, win or lose doesn't really matter, and you're more so in it to actually see how each individual player does and how exactly they all come together as a team. And the Sharks as a team looked pretty decent here tonight, but also an important factor to mention is that you're not really expecting some immense chemistry between any of these players, many of them only actually being in a sort of team environment together for a couple of weeks max. And so a lot of the plays that you will have seen during this game were more so individual based, as they're not going to be able to read off of each other exceptionally well. This is why a lot of the perhaps really solid passes didn't necessarily get finished by many of these players, and why this game looked relatively choppy even for a rookie face-off game. And so starting off immediately on the first line, we of course have William Eklund, his third rookie face-off tournament with the San Jose Sharks, likely the player on this roster who is the closest to an NHL spot, as he, I will not say has it locked down, but he'll likely at least play some NHL games going into this next season. And it was a bit of a slow start in this one for Eklund. He certainly wasn't bad in the first period, but definitely not at the level that you would expect for a player who should be, like I said, an NHL player next season. But definitely things picked up as the game went on. The second period was likely his best period of the game. A very nice play on the Tristan Robbins goal, not because it was some sort of high skill level play, but just a strong move that you would see at the NHL level. He makes the pass to Robbins, then continues his forward momentum, taking the Kings defender out of the play, allowing Robbins the time and space to actually take this shot and score this goal. So a very nice play by Eklund there, and generally finished off the game rather well still. I would probably give him about like a 7.5 out of 10 performance in this game. Maybe not as dominant as you would have liked to see, but still rather solid. Tristan Robbins was indeed one of the goal scorers for the San Jose Sharks in this game, at least in regulation, and he had a very strong start to this one. I thought he was perhaps the Sharks' best forward during the first period, but I would say things kind of fell off a bit from there. He's a player who had a couple of games with the San Jose Sharks at the end of last season and was kind of invisible during those games. So while it was nice to see him really pop off there in that first period, it definitely fell off as the game went on to end up being more of like a 6-on-10 type of performance. Then we have Haltunen. He was one of the youngest players here at this rookie face-off tournament, being one of the very few recent draftees of 2023. He gets placed on this top line with Eklund and Robbins, and he was advertised as being a heavy shooter once the Sharks drafted him, and he definitely showed that to be the case in this game. His first instinct in seemingly every situation is to get this puck as quickly as possible on net, though multiple times while he did shoot, it would not actually end up hitting the net, which was a bit of an issue. It seemed as though he got less and less ice time as this game went on, a player who was pretty consistently played during the first 30 minutes, but then not so much in the latter 30 minutes. When it comes to the second line, we had Quentin Musty, also a 2023 draft pick for the San Jose Sharks, so also one of the youngest players here, and he was very sneaky good. I wouldn't say he was maybe as apparent as like a William Eklund or a couple of the other players who I will mention a bit later on, but he definitely showed some solid positioning, some solid hockey IQ, a couple of very nice shooting opportunities, and the ability to draw penalties and really get into the mix. I feel as though Quentin Musty, obviously not not going to be making the NHL this season, but if he's able to build up some of that physicality where he had the sort of tendency of getting pushed around a bit in this game, if he's able to build up that strength and physicality over this next season, he could very well be an option for the San Jose Sharks going into the 24-25 season, which is not this year, but the year after that. So Musty, a pick that people were very excited about in the 2023 draft, looking pretty good here today. When it comes to Thomas Bordeleau, like Eklund, had a very slow start to this game. His first period was pretty bad if all things are considered, but definitely picked it up and was perhaps the Sharks' best forward over the last 40 minutes of this game in regulation time. Bordeleau, a lot of very, very nice passes, probably could have had like 2 or 3 assists in this game if his passes were actually finished up on. Didn't end up obviously happening, but still looked rather good, and also on the power play was very impressed with the moves that Bordeleau was pulling off. So this is definitely a good thing. Had a slightly disappointing stint with the San Jose Sharks at the end of last season, so hoping to pick it up. And while I mentioned that Eklund was probably the closest player to actually getting an NHL spot this upcoming season, Bordeleau perhaps the second closest player there. And then finally, they were also joined by Danil Gushchin on this line, kind of like Tristan Robbins. He had a very strong start to this game, a very good first period with Robbins, was the best forward for the San Jose Sharks, but it slowly declined, where his second and third period, while still decent, were not all that great. When it comes to the third line of Weisblatt, Marek, and Co., this was a line that for the first couple of periods of this game were pretty invisible. You'd barely really notice them there. A couple of like bursts of speed from both Weisblatt and Co., but otherwise not really much. But they definitely had a few very good shifts in the third period. One of them, or actually a couple of them, leading to goals, but one of them more primarily them involved in the goal. Marek scored in that one. He was probably the best player of this line, if I had to say. When it comes to both Weisblatt and Co., and in particular Weisblatt, this is, I believe, his third or perhaps even fourth rookie face-off tournament with the San Jose Sharks, and his sort of expectations went from middle six forward at first to down to like a fourth liner to now I'm not even sure if he's ever going to be able to break out of the AHL. It's just, I feel as though at this point of his development, you're expecting a bit more from him, and besides like a couple bursts of speed and like maybe like a good pass here or there wasn't just really all that much. So not some great things from Weisblatt. When it comes to Brandon Coe, kind of similar, though maybe not as high expectations really at any point. Yes, he did have that really strong junior year in his overager year, but I don't really put that much stock in that. So generally, the two wingers on this line, not amazing, though decent third periods. And Marek, also a player who was just actually recently signed by the Barracuda, so not necessarily a prospect, so to speak, for the San Jose Sharks, but considered a rookie, so he's able to play in this game. And I thought, like I said, he was the best of this third line, though not anything to blow me away either. When it comes to the fourth line, we have McEachern and Russell, who both didn't really play huge roles in this game. Really, it was mostly Ethan Cardwell who was playing on this fourth line, but eventually got time higher up in the lineup and even through overtime. Cardwell was noticeable for sure in this game, sometimes for positive reasons, but also sometimes for negative reasons. A couple of really awkward defensive plays of trying to do too much in that first period, but then he kind of turned things around, had a couple more solid defensive plays, as well as a couple good looks offensively. In particular, had a nice one in overtime, so it was definitely nice to see Cardwell, and Cardwell is probably like the new Aussie Weisblatt to me in a way, not exactly in the same way that they play the game. Weisblatt definitely more physical than Cardwell, but more so as like Cardwell is my more prediction to be like a potential future fourth liner for the San Jose Sharks over these next couple of years. When it comes to the defensive side of things, we had the first pairing of Thrun and Mukhamadullin, both defensemen who have a decent chance of playing in the NHL next season. Thrun more so than Mukhamadullin. This was a decent game, a steady game from Thrun, not super impressive, I would say, and slightly slow start to this one as well. His first period wasn't great, but still certainly not too bad, maybe like a 6.57 on 10. Mukhamadullin, on the other hand, he was very up and down, I would say. Reminds me a lot of Brent Burns in a way. Certainly showed some strong offensive capabilities, some good offensive sort of hockey IQ as well. A very nice pass play that he made at the end of the first period definitely stood out to me as a positive for Mukhamadullin. But on the other side of things, also has that very same issue that Brent Burns did, which was his defensive play certainly seemed to leave a lot to be desired. He was completely wildly out of position on the Kings' second goal in this one. A couple of very bad giveaways as well in his own zone. So it was nice to see the offensive upside, but it's going to be difficult to actually lock down a spot for the Sharks at the NHL level when you're making those types of really, really bad mistakes in your game. So we'll see if Mukhamadullin does clean things up, because there is indeed, like I said, that upside, but you can't come with that level of downside as well. When it comes to the second pairing, we had Pooley here, who I thought was honestly pretty decent in this game. Not amazing, doesn't really stand out in a super positive light, but as a player who was probably not coming in with super high expectations, I thought he did relatively decent. But it was actually Gannon Larocque who I think stole the spotlight on this second pairing. Larocque actually looking rather good, scored a goal in this game, just solid throughout, and perhaps was even the Sharks' best defenseman in this game. Him and Thrun were relatively close, but I would perhaps even actually edge Larocque out in that situation. So that was definitely rather interesting to see. And then when it comes to the third defensive pairing, a late substitution in this game, it was expected to be Guriev and Furlong getting this third pairing role, but it was actually going to be Guriev and Cagnoni instead. Cagnoni, a very slow start, not actually through the fault of himself, but because it didn't seem as though this pairing actually got much ice time at all in that first period. But as the second and third period came, definitely were given more opportunities to roll. Cagnoni also very much coming as advertised, a player who seemingly has a strong offensive touch to this game. He had some very nice breakout passes from his own zone, but at the same time, obviously, some defensive issues, some size issues where he was getting out-muscled at times along the boards. So generally a work in progress type of player, but someone who does seemingly have that potential to become a good player for the Sharks, but likely not as soon out of the gate like the other 2023 draftee that I mentioned with Quinton Musty, probably more so 2 to 3 years into the future. And then finally, we have the goaltender for the Sharks who played the entire game, interestingly enough. That is Romanov. Showed off some strong lateral movements in this game, but one thing that I did notice is that he doesn't seem to really use his size exceptionally well. I remember watching in the first period and seeing as how he sort of handled himself in the net and the way he made himself appear in the net. I was thinking, is this guy like 5'10", 5'11"? That's relatively short for a goaltender. And then I looked it up to see that he was 6'5", which for a 6'5" goaltender, you're expecting to be able to make yourself much bigger in your crease, which I didn't think Romanov really took advantage of. He had some issues with rebounds as well, but generally there was some solid athleticism to him, which was nice to see, and it was an all-around pretty decent game for the goaltender. So in the end, pretty good performance, I would say, to start off this rookie faceoff tournament. Like I said, the Sharks did win, even though that didn't really matter all that much. And some really good, solid performances, and we shall hope that things pick up a bit as we move on into Game 2 tomorrow, and then Game 3 on Monday. Class dismissed.